Hello and welcome to another edition of Windsor Writes. My name is Julienne Rousseau, and joining me today are two local artists who will be treating us with a conversation about the ways in which poverty affects people living in our communities. I have here with me Douglas MacLellan. Douglas is a Windsor-based photographer and author. His first book, called In the Face of It, is a book of photographs from his experience while traveling the world, including Uganda and Zimbabwe. Doug has over 25 years of independent professional photography experience, including the title of official photographer for the Hockey Hall of Fame, the Toronto International Film Festival, and the University of Windsor. Douglas captures authentic and dignified moments in time, and his new book, The Mission, about the downtown mission, is hot off the press. Thanks for joining us, Doug.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Also with me today is Travis Reitsma. Travis is a PhD candidate in sociology at the University of Windsor, who studies urban poverty and the barriers faced by those who experience it. In 2017, he spent the better part of the year embedded in the lives of folks who use panhandling as coping strategies for extreme poverty, wherein he conducted an ethnographic investigation of the lived experiences and daily challenges they faced. He is also a singer-songwriter, an anti-poverty activist, and labor organizer with the Windsor branch of the Industrial Workers of the World. Thanks for being here today, Travis.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, no problem. So now I'll turn things over to Travis and we'll begin this conversation.
Hey, Doug.
Hey, Travis. How are you?
Not too bad. It's been a while since we've got to speak in person. So this is really nice. But
still, it's a while.
Yeah, I wanted to congratulate you on your book. I was saying before, I feel a bit ashamed because I haven't had the chance or the money yet to go and pick one up. But I know what kind of a photographer you are, and also what kind of an activist you are, and an advocate for people in the city. So I'm sure that it's a worthy read and viewing. So I'm looking forward to picking it up. But yeah, I kind of wanted to come on here. I mean, I was asked to come on here to discuss some of my research. So as Julienne said, I spent most of 2017 embedded with folks on the street, for lack of a better word. I mean, it was around panhandling. That was kind of the initial thing. But as I've been writing up the dissertation and sort of reflecting on my notes and on the research that I conducted, it's really become sort of a wider project just about people living hard, and that's people who happen to be homeless. That's also people who are living on, ODSP and OW, and maybe have some form of housing, but it may not be particularly stable, or they're just, struggling to have their daily needs met. So one of the coping strategies for that is obviously panhandling. So that was kind of how I got into that whole thing.
Excellent. What did you find? That's not cut and dry, is it? Like, no. You might have started off as panhandling, but it goes into all sorts of complexities.
Right. I mean, I keep, I have probably 20 chapters that I have to whittle down to a lot less than that talk about different things. So there's like, the intersection with housing issues, which is the biggest one probably, but then there's also intersections of gender, how this affects women and how this affects gender non-binary people, how it affects the young, like teenagers and youths on the street. There's all kinds of different, not only intersections, but just life stories that are told. And it really is a complicated thing. Poverty is a very complicated and nuanced and ever-changing and fluid thing. So, yeah.
I agree. It started off as kind of a homeless book for me, but it ended up being, what was really revealed was the impact of opioids. Mm-hmm. Did you experience that in your studies too?
And I think, for me, I think 2017 was sort of a weird turning point year, because I think by the next year, poverty in the city looked a lot different. It looked a lot more severe and a lot more prevalent. Not to say that it wasn't in 2017, but I think there was a shift in 2018, 2019, and obviously during the pandemic. But yeah, so drug use in general, but definitely the opioid crisis and addiction and those issues, which are obviously intertwined with poverty for, pretty obvious reasons.
You were down at the Cut for some time too, right?
Yeah, so I was going down there almost every day this past spring and summer and into the fall, just kind of checking in on people. Like a lot of it ended up being conversations with police because they were they were interacting down there quite a bit too, and obviously they tend to be a lot more willing to talk to people who maybe look quote unquote a little more middle class, right? Like they knew that when I was down there that I wasn't homeless, and so like they weirdly treated me with more respect, which is not a good thing, but definitely it helped kind of contextualize their presence down there for people and also for the wider community as well.
And yet you still weren't allowed to cross the invisible line when they took those people out.
Yeah, so the incident you're referring to in early November, the city, in conglomeration with the people who own the property, development company out of, I think, London, decided that even though they had been down there for years on and off, that the unhoused folks down there were not to be there anymore. So they sent the police down to remove them with only a couple days notice. And then, not to spend too much time ragging on the city, but the city did kind of take a little bit of credit for finding them housing, which wasn't the case. It was community members, Angels for the Homeless, and the IWW, and a few other groups that were kind of, working that day and the days before to get, and also I should say too, I forget the name of them, but there's another social work group as well that was down there that were doing that work. It really wasn't the city per se, but yes, that was a very difficult day to sort of see the violent removal of people from, for better or worse, their homes, even though they were just tents in a rail cut, but still where they had all their stuff and where they had some semblance of safety. So,
oh well, that was done.
Yeah. Well, we were able to get at least half the people into some sort of housing. We'll call it housing, like decent, better than a tent, I guess. But then the other half, we don't know. They just dispersed throughout the city.
Julienne's a volunteer at the mission.
Mm-hmm.
So she was telling me that the numbers are up now, people who are coming for breakfast. So it was around 40 or 50 or 60 in the summer and the fall. And now she says it's 100 or more. And I find that interesting. I'm not sure if I expected that. I don't think I expected that.
Yeah. I'm wondering how much of it has to do with the sort of increased housing insecurity around the pandemic and the Ontario government's sort of willingness to go through with evictions in spite of the fact that many people's income has been interrupted. So I wonder if that has something to do with it.
Well, that's definitely, like, it's not all street people who meet at the downtown mission either. It is a community. That's what what really I like the most about the project that I did was how the mission calls the clients guests. So the people who use the services, who I would say are clients, they call them guests. And then there's the staff and volunteers who also form part of the community. And what's interesting is, many of the volunteers were homeless at one point or had addiction issues. Probably some of the staff are like that too. And in fact, I know that some of the staff are like that. Mm-hmm. So, when you see it in the perspective as a community, it's a lot different than just there's the people, So what you get are people who come for a breakfast and stay around in the courtyard and just talk, like meeting guests, meeting their friends, to people who are, literally passing through.
Yeah.
So, but it was, I've done this work for a long, long time. I've never done it where I've actually just listened extensively to stories.
Right.
And then the stories part was interesting because, it's kind of a journalistic fashion. I should probably check out the facts, but I decided to not really say the fact or check out the stories because I have a feeling that the stories are at least true in some kind of initial way. Mm-hmm. Maybe the numbers are exaggerated or what happened was exaggerated, but I think there's something. And the thing that did you find this in your listening to people? Did you find that to be broken down into had a bad childhood, or the one that surprised me the most that people told me was I was in an accident of some sort. I had to go on opioids of some sort, and I just simply got addicted. I never could get off of them.
Yeah, I mean, one of the people in my study, he was a roofer out east, and fell off a roof and injured his hip and was unable to get workers' compensation through like a combination of, the company screwing him over and workers' comp also screwing him over and saying that he, it was his fault somehow. I'm not really sure on the story of that one, but then he was told he had a job here waiting for him by like some sort of in-law or friend of an in-law. So he came all the way to Windsor. The job was not there. He was having pain in his hip, so he was prescribed opioids. Now he doesn't have a job. He's in a new city where he doesn't know anybody, and he's on opioids. And it just sort of goes from there. And it can be a quick unraveling once that starts to happen. It doesn't take long for anyone. I think that one of the things about your book that I'm looking forward to is that sort of the realization, I hope, for people that most of us, the vast majority of us, are not actually very far from that situation. We're a few instances of bad luck from being right there with them. And I know like I've struggled with poverty my whole adult life. So I'm very aware of how easy it would be to suddenly be on the street or be in that sort of vulnerable situation.
It's certainly crossed my mind a lot of times, there, but for the grace of God go I. Yeah. I used to save that expression for dodgy times in Zimbabwe, but it sort of became a front of mind, not a mantra, but kind of like that when I was photographing. This is work that when you photograph it these days, you mentioned certain other issues, like gender and age, and I tend to look at things more holistically in what I see in front of me, as opposed to, specific people with issues that they need to have addressed. And but all that stuff gets raised, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you mentioned too, like the sort of like the stories that you hear as well, and how like all of us are prone to embellishing our stories, especially when we're trying to convince someone that we're worthy of attention. We're going to do that even more, right? And these are folks that aren't used to being given very much attention. So when you ask them their stories, like any of us, we're going to embellish and exaggerate. But I think that also goes into the sort of normal chaos, as I've started to call it, is the normal chaos of poverty, where people who are on the street or close to it, or just have housing insecurity or whatever their issues dealing with extreme poverty, their lives are very normally chaotic. It's just all the time chaotic. I mean, any day, for instance, the police could send bulldozers into your home to wreck your tent while you're sleeping, like that sort of thing, that sort of insecurity on a very secure level. I think just it heightens everything. It gets people are when they're in those situations, what they're experiencing is trauma, and it's ongoing trauma. And so that heightens how we feel about our day-to-day surroundings and sort of makes everything burn a little brighter, I guess. But yeah, I sort of have used that term, the normal chaos of poverty, because it does sort of just, it's an entirely chaotic existence a lot of the time, and also extremely mundane at the same time. There's oftentimes nothing to do, and things like that. So it's an interesting juxtaposition.
I think that's the follow-up book title.
Yeah, I think that's
chaos.
I
gotta get it's going to be the title of my dissertation first. So there you go.
Okay, so you're using that one. That's a good one.
That really is normal chaos of poverty. And Doug, if I can interrupt for a second, because Travis was talking about life stories, and we're talking about these specific stories. And as a volunteer at the Downtown Mission, I struggle because I'm there to help, and I want to help, but I don't know how to help people. And when I was reading some of your poems, you talk about someone who's overdosed and gone blue, and how reviving this person is very traumatic for everyone, including the staff. And I was really moved by your poem. So I'm wondering if you could talk about that for a minute and possibly read that poem.
I have to find it. Do you have a page in that?
I think it was number 3 or number 6.
Okay.
Number 6, it's on page
Yeah.
22.
Yeah, it's not number 3. That's my political statement.
I really liked that one too. I remember I needed to point that out to you, but yes, number 6. Can you read that one for us?
Paula, Director of Programs and Services, is talking about an overdose OD case. The young woman needed 8 Noxolone shots, chest compressions, and finally an ambul bag to be resuscitated. Even though she saved the woman, Paula doesn't feel good. It happens too often, and this one was close. She was dead, blue, she says, dead. Paula looks like she is going to cry. People just don't know what we do here. And that's the instant the project took over. That's when I became fully invested in that project. She's seen that a lot. And I know that the young woman that she was talking about, and the young woman's been doing that for 3 years. That's just, wow.
Yeah. And, I've brought 2 people back from with naloxone, one person who was actually part of the study and another person who wasn't. But yeah, even this past summer in the rail cut, we went down there one morning and people were kind of, a little extra heightened that day. And, we were like, what's going on? And they're like, well, 3 people overdosed here last night. We had to bring them all back and we had to use all of our naloxone. And they had like a dozen kits because we brought down a dozen kits like the week before.
Oh my.
And we had to use all of like whatever this is. It was worse than the normal fent, that's down there. And just this sort of like shell shocked look on people, like, and they don't have the luxury of calling the police or an ambulance, right? Because that also puts them in danger in a lot of ways of being removed from where they are or having some sort of negative interaction with police. So they won't do that. So they're literally going to like do it themselves. And these people down there that just saved 3 people's lives. And like, it's the same sort of thing. It wasn't like, oh, look at us, we saved these people's lives. It was like this sort of look of horror, like this keeps happening and I keep losing friends.
This keeps happening. Yeah. Yeah. There's a picture in the book of a guy who was just absolutely flabbergasted, a longtime user, and just got something that he couldn't handle. And he claimed to have been dead 6 hours before, and he was just like wandering, just dazed, right? So, I mean, I'm glad I photographed either before something happens or after something happens. So that, usually the work of this kind of work is almost always like those dramatic stories that we're talking about, right? And not the ones that we were talking about previously, which is just listening to stories, just communicating with other humans, which is kind of quiet and not very dramatic, but people want to be heard, and the stories, like, I always find it really hard to leave a story because I want to do something more. Like the people I took pictures of, they don't care. They go back into their normal day. It was kind of fun for the guy to come and take pictures. But for me, it's something. And, one of the things that was, if we're going to get a little bit kind of political or activist-like, is that a city councillor had gone on public and said that, he shouldn't donate to the downtown mission. And that had such a negative effect on donations. And I'm lobbying the councillor these days quietly, just to see if he could publicly come back and, to whatever degree he feels comfortable saying, even if he has to say, make up stories or whatever, just to say, given that we have more people using the mission, and my story isn't a story about the mission, the downtown mission at all. It's about the community who meets at the mission.
Right.
But the need is great right now, and they need money, and they need, they just need donations. So I'm hoping that the book will help that in some way. We'll see.
Yeah.
It's nice to sell books, but it's also good to have something constructive happen out of it.
Yeah. It's interesting too that you say that the whole angle about stories. And I remember when I first started my study, I had been connected with the the broader term, the panhandler community, for a few years through my work with the IWW locally. And so I knew some people, but there was a lot of people that I didn't know. And I'd never done a study of that scale before. So I wander out on the street and I'm like, how the hell am I going to start talking to people? Like, I'm just going to walk up to them and be like, hey, I'm this academic. Can, you help me finish my dissertation while I ask you about your life? Like, it's a weird thing. But what I found was like, almost instantly, and there's a few people who obviously were different, just a generalization, but almost everybody wanted to talk, and they were just shocked that anyone cared. And I think that's like, that comes with being passed on the street every day, and not just being completely ignored by most people. And then when someone comes up and says, hey, like, I actually want to hear your story, I want to ask you about your parents, I want to ask you about have you, when you did work, if you did work, are you still working?
Yeah.
What did your parents do for a living? Like, have you been to prison? Where, like, how did this all happen? Like, they sort of ask these sort of basic questions that would lead down a rabbit hole of people talking about their life. And I had very little, like, I wouldn't even get through my questions. It would just be,
Right.
I would get the answers to them just by asking one question and then listening for an hour.
Yeah, that's usually how my thing was, just trying to get people to because it's the photography point. People will listen to your story, no problem, but to get a picture is the
right.
Just don't like having their
That's
picture
hard.
taken, and there's reasons for that, right? There's outstanding warrants, there's
Yep.
shame, and then there's the opposite. There's people just can't, they always want their picture taken. They can't help it. So
Yeah.
that's interesting.
Same thing with
I remember
recording.
the Panhandler project, and organizing, how you organize or help to organize. They self-organize, obviously.
Right.
But,
Yeah.
that was really, like, I got to know at least 3 people on that who were regular panhandlers who, don't you find that the level of the conversation is not too much different than the one we're having right now?
Oh, it's the same. Like, that's the thing. Like I became friends with these folks, and I spent 8 months down there. I'd be going down there every day. I was the guy that brought them cigarettes and food, like
Right.
I was just, and like, I'd just sit and chat with them for like a lot of the time, not even really doing my study. Like, they kind of knew that whenever I was there, they were being observed. But like a lot of the time I was just going down there to hang out, and just like to see my friends. Like, really, that's what it was.
Don't worry, you're being observed too.
Oh yeah.
That community knows you. They know exactly what you're doing, where you're going.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is fine. It's a two-way street, right?
Yep, absolutely. I expect that, right? Like, I should be held accountable to that stuff too, right? Yeah. So big takeaway, I guess, like I was saying earlier, just the real culture, and that, maybe to an extent our politicians and other sort of factors lead us to believe that these are people who have made big mistakes in their life, that they make bad decisions, that they're bad people and made a bad character, and that's why they are where they are. But that's not the case. I mean, there are good and bad people in every sector of society, and that's no different than with people on the street. And again, that sort of normal chaos of poverty leads people to sometimes make decisions we wouldn't make because you're not living their life. So I think that the realization that ultimately we're not that far removed from their situation. Again, we're one stab of bad luck away from being there ourselves. So that's kind of the big takeaway, and just like sort of general inadequacy of our society to take care of our people. I think that's the biggest thing. It can be really, really frustrating. Like, after hearing these stories, and you start, like, I achieved, what academics call saturation pretty quickly, like that. I started hearing the same stories over and over again,
Right.
because like, yes, everybody has their own unique story and perspective, but ultimately, the biggest thing is this sort of the complete failure of society to look after its own people. And I think that frustration, that anger is felt by people on the street. They feel it too. It's not just us looking down and saying, oh, well, we should be doing something better. They feel that too. They also feel marginalized and feel like they have been left behind, that they have, and it feels deliberate when it's happening to you. So I think those are the big takeaways that I had from it.
I can definitely concur with most of what you just said. Like, that's the same experience. The one thing I wanted to make a note of was I had to keep remembering that, or reminding myself that I'm taking pictures and interviewing people at their worst. This is the worst they're going to be most likely at their life. A lot of people will come through this, a lot of people won't. Some people it's a life choice. Some people there's they'll make, I've already noticed a few people definitely don't come back anymore. And I think maybe that they had enough. Some people, this will be life until the end. That for some reason really helped guide me, and it helps me understand that, the fact that you're allowing me to take your picture or do your story is a gift. And like you said, people are very aware that they're on the street, that they have a drug problem, that they're poor, that they have a mental health problem. They're super aware of it, to the extent that they could tell you all the psychological stuff, right? This is what I have, and this is why it happened to me. They've got a good story, and it's probably pretty accurate.
Yeah.
The other thing that astonishes me is at the beginning of the pandemic, our federal government was able to find hundreds of billions of dollars to help address a really serious problem. Ann Jarvis 2 weeks ago said the number one problem in our city is homelessness and the complexities thereof: shelter, drugs, mental health, the whole bit. That's the biggest problem. We're not going to find money here for that, but we can. We know we can.
Absolutely.
And so, I was just utterly amazed that we could throw deficits, budgets out the door, and find the money. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And I think we should find what
governments should do.
You and I know that, let's say there's 1,000 homeless people, marginalized people in this city. If we bought them each a home, it would probably cost less than what it's ultimately going to be for us to pay for ODSP, OW, mental health, psychiatric services, ambulance services, policing services, blah, blah, blah. It goes on.
Yeah.
It's just astonishing.
Yeah, that's the fiscal argument, but then there's also just the sort of humane argument, that Canada is one of the richest countries on the entire planet. There's absolutely no excuse for us letting people live on the street, or even close to it, even have people live in poverty.
People make choices. Mm-hmm. There are some people that are just as antisocial as you can imagine, and they want to live out in the woods. They want to be that way. That's a choice, and they're okay with that. Now, unfortunately, a lot of times comes with a mental health issue with that. But for the most part, I've done a lot of work in this area, and that's an easy conclusion I made. There are some people, just like some people want to be soldiers. Some people want to be politicians. Some people want to live out in the fields or live out on their own or not be part of the society, until they need it for whatever reason. Mental health, whatever. I'm sick. I got gangrene. I can't deal with it. That kind of thing. I've seen all that. So that happens.
I think we have time to hear one more poem. Would you like to read one for us out of your book?
I'm going to read one more. It's a short one, a really short one. And it was done, I did a couple of weeks before taking any pictures, like actually probably a month or so. And I would literally go around and just circle the mission, go in and out of it, just no cameras, no nothing. And I was trying to, there's a format that I was trying to follow for the book. And one of them was, I'm not a poet. I mean, I'm a photographer. As a poet, I'm a good photographer, But one of the first things I came up was called Victoria Walk By. Broken bodies, tiny hunched over woman, drugs for sale at the park pickup truck, sidewalk crowded, under trees, various bodies prone, an aimless spirit, 3 shelled hard-boiled eggs on the pavement, crushed shells nearby. That's my effort at poetry.
I like in your poetry, Doug, because it's like looking at a photograph, where
that's what I want. That's
exactly.
What I
And
want.
the poem where you're walking by, it's like I'm walking right alongside with you, seeing it.
Yeah. And then I want to do the same with the photos. I want the photos to maybe generate something in the viewer's mind too, that it was more than just a picture of somebody, against the wall. My least favorite picture, by the way. Up against the wall, shoot him.
Now, Doug, if the viewers would like to get a hold of a copy of your book, how could they go about doing that?
The book is available now at Biblioasis on Wyandotte Street, and that is probably the best place to get it right at this moment. I have a website shop page, and you can order books through that. I get them. If you live in Windsor, I'm happy to sign the books and deliver them to your doorstep or close, under the COVID rules. Otherwise, pick them up at Biblioasis. But the link is a really long one, but Douglas MacLellan Photography will get you to my webpage, and then there's a shop tab, and it's featured in the shop tab. You can't.
Okay, perfect. And I'll leave some information at the end of this video. I'll leave that link and some more information for viewers that would like to get a copy of that. And that concludes our conversation for today. Thanks, Doug, for meeting with us, and thanks, Travis, for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you, Julienne, for hosting.
You're welcome.
Travis, great to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you too, Doug.
Let's get together.
Congrats on the book, and I'm going to get a copy real soon.
Yes, do get that. We can arrange for the book.
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, well, thanks so much, and thanks to everyone for viewing.
Thank you very much. Bye.